Hello, I'm John Kaczynski from Saginaw Valley State University, and this is Hey Bay City.
Woo! Yeah, see, I had faith in you.
Hey, you know what? That's my drama teacher, Ron Mindy, would be happy by that. I made that drama class pay
Thanks,
off.
Ron, educators shaping the future. It paid off. Yeah. Well, John, I'm excited to talk to you today. We're doing this fun little series, just exploring this idea of attraction and retention. Had a couple good conversations with Jason Story. I think you're brilliant, not just because you're a fellow bald man.
Well, we avoid the barbers. Sorry, barbers. Sorry.
We think you're amazing. We just don't ever go to you. So like you coming in and talking about attraction or attention from the perspective of like Saginaw Valley State University and your own thoughts, I think is just going to be so important for this broader conversation of like, how do we crack this nugget of attraction or retention?
Yeah. So I've been asking the basic question lately for people that live in the community. How did you get here? Why did you or your family come to Bay City, Bay County? And it's a question I often think about. And when we talk more about this, my family came over from Poland, 1882, settled in Bay City. Now, the factors back then are completely different than the factors now, right? They were escaping war. Mm-hmm. They were escaping famine. They were looking for a better quality of life, which kind of plays into what we're going to talk about here, right? Quality of life. Mm-hmm. Came in 1882, settled in the south end of Bay City, helped build St. Stan's Catholic Church. Then they had the Bishop of Milwaukee show up and say, hey, you know what? We got a lot of Lutherans moving into the western side of Bay County. We need some Catholics to pick up and go move there. We bought a plot of land for you. So a bunch of Poles from the south end of Bay City that were farmers moved out to Auburn, got a plot of land, built St. Anthony's Church. And so that's where my grandfather was baptized and grew up. And then my father grew up there. And then my father kind of got away. He went to college, went out to the West Coast, came back, went to Columbus, Ohio. Why does a U of M grad go to Columbus, Ohio for a job? And so he worked for Bell Labs, actually worked on a thing called fiber optics, and then met my mother. And then he moved back. Why? Because of family in the 70s. Yeah. I went to Bay City Western High School, graduated, went to college. I was living in different locations. And why did I come back? Well, I met a girl up here, and her family was here, and my family was here. And so we moved back. And so when I asked that question, I even asked you, Phil, like, were you originally from here? Did your family come here? What was your story?
Yeah, it was, grew up in Elma. Went to high school in Saginaw, ended up in Minnesota, teacher training college there, getting into education. Got my first teacher job in Bay City as a middle school teacher. And my family not from Bay City, but 45 minutes to the west. And I think even though like my story different than your story, different, and everybody's story is different, I think what's really interesting about what you were saying about going all the way back to 1880 is that the specific circumstances are different, but like there's base principles of why somebody moves to a place, why somebody's attracted to a place, why somebody stays in a place, and you hit on a couple of them in being like quality of life. We have it looks to me like I have a potential to lead a higher quality of life here rather than there. And that leads me to be interested. Those family ties, I think family even, you can use a different word there. It means the same thing. Community. Like, am I going to be surrounded by people, whether it's family, blood relatives, or a really close-knit community that are able to support me, make my life better, fill gaps that I need, offer opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Yep. Yeah. I live in Frankenmuth now, right? I serve in the Frankenmuth City Council, but do you know where I feel most at home outside of Frankenmuth?
Where? Tell me.
Bay City.
Boom.
Because I have a sense of belonging there. My family was there. And even I joke, we, in the northern part of the U.S., specifically in Michigan, we have a dialect. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, we don't hear it, but we're kind of like a combination between Canadians, Minnesota, and like northern Ohio. Yeah, it's a Chicago Midwest accent with an A to it.
Yeah, every time I go work in Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, immediately everybody lets me know. It's like,
Yeah.
so where are you from?
and I often say, like, I grew up in Bay City, Michigan, and I can go into a bar, I can go into a restaurant, everybody sounds like me. And that dialect, people don't think about it, but like wherever you're from, you immediately, when you have that connection, there's a sense of belonging. Then you find out, where's their geography? Where are they from? You could be anywhere around the world. And if I hear somebody with that Midwestern accent, I go, where are you from? 9 times out of 10, they're like Chicago, Detroit. And when I say I'm from Bay City, like, where's Bay City? You always say 90 minutes north of Detroit, or you hold up the hand, right? But it's that sense of belonging. And so we think about this 40K by 2040, right? I often ask the next question is, why did you come here, or why are you here? Is how do you as the individual or individual in an organization or organization in a community help attain that goal? And so for me, in living in Frankenmuth, working for Saginaw Valley State University, growing up, going to Bay City Western High School, I ask, where's my little small piece of that pie? How can I help attain that goal? And there's a couple things that I think about, like, what are the 4 entry points? I kind of put in this document here for us to really think about, like, what are the 4 entry points for somebody if we're trying to attract them to the region, to come to our region? First one is the college student, right? In the lifespan of a person, right? If you go through K-12, unless the parents are making that decision until you hit 18. You hit 18, you're picking about where you want to go to college. And that's a serious decision. You think about, we're now talking about 9th graders doing college visits, right? When when we went to college, it was like my senior year. And it was one of those, like, are you going to go to college? Are you not going to college? Where are you going? Right.
Yep.
I joined the Army and I went to Delta College. Right. And it was one of those that did a semester at Delta, went and did basic training, then went to Central Michigan University and did my undergraduate education there. And why did I pick Central? Well, I sit there as like any 18-year-old. It was I was a party school and it was a cool community. And people go, really? That's why you picked it? And I visited a couple different colleges, and I felt at home in that community. And now looking back at 44, retrospectively, I go, that was pretty immature. I should have probably been like, does my values align with the faculty? Right? There wasn't this discussion about financial aid back then. I mean, every university you go to, they've got lots of scholarships. They've got a lot of mechanisms in place to make you feel like you belong, but I belong there. And so I'll go through 2 and 3 here in a second, and I'll go back to 1. But number 2 would be, when you graduate. For both of us, it was like, when you graduate, it's like, okay, you've been kicked out of the nest. You got to fly. Where are you going to fly to now? And for me, I went down to Lansing. I was a political science person, right? Went down to Lansing, but I also started working on a doctoral degree at Michigan State University. And East Lansing was kind of like the grown-up version of Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant was much more undergrad. East Lansing, much more cosmopolitan, right? You go out to a coffee shop, and you'd start having discussions about topics that don't matter to day-to-day life, right? Right. Yeah. And then I lived down there, and I was working down there, and it was actually 2006. I'm living in East Lansing, but I got my job at Saginaw Valley State University. And I tell people, like, this is one of those pinch points of, like, why didn't I move back to the region? And it was because I had a stronger sense of belonging to the community in East Lansing than I did to the Great Lakes Bay region circa 2006. I can't say today that I would make that same decision, because in 2006, we talk about the Saginaw Spirit. Saginaw Spirit was just kind of getting up and going. The Dow Diamond was just getting built. The Great Lakes Loons were there. But we didn't have the vibrant downtown living options we do today, and that we'll come back to that a little bit more. But I felt like, East Lansing had transit. East Lansing had the housing I wanted to live in. They had the kind of the lifestyle that I wanted for a younger person. And then it was, really 8 years later, I met my spouse at a political fundraiser for Mike Hanley when he was running for clerk. And I kind of knew who she was, but she stole my pizza at a fundraiser. and she came up to me, and I was sitting along two gentlemen. One of them was Gavin Getz from AT&T, and another was Greg Dietrich. He works for Frankenmuth Credit Union. And she comes up. I had 2 pieces of pizza. Well, she shows up late, typical. And are you going to eat both those pieces of pizza? Yeah, I'm a big guy. I'm going to eat both those pieces of pizza.
Look at me. I'm a two-piece guy.
I love. Which I gotta try out the old world pizza.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It's amazing. You need to. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a pizza guy. You
Every
can tell
day.
I'm a well-fed exterior.
What's really incredible about the old world pizza is people, if you haven't heard the story about this new pizza place in Saginaw, you got to try it. But folks from the East Coast, we have so many East Coast like transplants or folks with East Coast connections that just pop into that shop every single day, all day long. It's like, I'm from New York. I'm from New Jersey. I've been waiting for a place like this. It's really, really cool to see.
I got to try it. I'm a pizza guy. I'm a pizza guy. I don't do the rankings. I'm not going to go out in front of your pizza place. And
so she took your pizza anyway?
She took my pizza. So I turned my head, and then all of a sudden she takes my pizza. Well, then everything else was history. We started dating. We got engaged, and I moved up to Frankenmuth from East Lansing, and I've lived there. Well, she lived in Chicago. She went from Frankenmuth to Michigan State. Went to the School of Hospitality, went to Chicago, got on the executive team at Sheraton, the Sheraton Grand in downtown Chicago, was climbing the corporate ladder there. And she got to 2012, 2013, and there are two factors. Quality of life didn't align, even though we were talking about that vibrant downtown living lifestyle. Once you get into your 30s, you're like, okay, the friends lifestyle kind of wore out, right?
Yeah.
And then she goes, I want to be back close to my family. So she moved back to Frankenmuth. And then when we were getting engaged, we were like, were we going to continue to live in Frankenmuth? Well, her job was there, right? My job was here, but it was also the high quality school. So it was one of those things we're now thinking forward about not us, but our children, our future children.
Yeah.
And so we continued to live there. Now, that's where I'm at now. And I think about, okay, when I retire, that's like the third entry point is family and kids, like picking where you want to live. But then the fourth entry point, I think about aging in place and retiring, right? Well, in our family, we never retire. We're just going to work, till 100 years old. But for a lot of people, when they are empty nesters and school districts aren't holding it back because they don't want to pull their kids out of school, halfway through and start a new community. Then it's, where do I age in place? Where do I go? And I was talking to a colleague the other day. She's going to be retiring here in end of December. And she plans on moving back to the East Coast. And the two factors are quality of life and where her family are, her kids. Where do their kids move? And so she's looking at that community. One of them was Ithaca, New York, where Cornell University is located, right?
Yeah.
And she was kind of highlighting the back of my, like I was listening to her. What are the things you're looking for? Well, they like to ride bikes. They like to walk. They like the restaurants, boom, all these checklists. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, this is what somebody who's retiring wants to do. So I mentioned those four. And that's what we kind of have to think about in the region. Like those are the four entry points, and how are we targeting each one of those demographics? And for me at Saginaw Valley, the one thing that we're specifically talking about is how do we get more students to come to Saginaw Valley? But also we're a partner in helping the region. How do we get those students, once they come to Saginaw Valley, to stay in the region?
Yep.
Right. So it's kind of a twofold thing.
Yeah. Let's jump into Saginaw Valley in a second. I just want to highlight a couple of the things that you said. One, this phrase of a sense of belonging, something that you said to me, I always remember, and I tell folks whenever this conversation comes up. It was after a workshop at SVSU that we were at. And afterwards, we were sitting there at the table talking, and I'm paraphrasing, but you had said, people can find jobs anywhere. You can be an engineer here or an engineer there or an engineer here. Like the job, you have to have the jobs, but what really convinces people to stay in a place or move to the place are relationships.
Yep.
Whether that relationship is with family members or with close friends. All my friends are moving to Austin, Texas, so I'm headed there too, or more locally, Detroit. Like all my friends are graduating and trying their luck in Detroit, so I'm going to go there too. It's really that relationship. But also the relationship to the place. It feels like home. It feels like a place that I'm welcome. And something you alluded to is that there's a lot of different factors that people are looking for. When you gave your example of young John Kaczynski making decisions about where to go to college, some students are all in that it sounds like a party school where I'm going to have fun and the community looks fun. And so that makes my decision.
Yep.
That was probably the answer for so many kids. You have some like me where a lot of my friends are going to this college, so I don't really know where I'm going to go. I don't really have a feeling either way, so I'm going to follow them there. That's what took me there. Other kids are like, I have a set path to success in my life. I want this, and I want to get this degree from here, and I want to be making X amount of money, and here's my professional development. So I think it really underlines how both educational institutions and communities, they need a broad base of attractive assets, whether that's a community vibe or hard resources or small businesses. And even though you may look at something like a bike lane and say, I'm never riding a bike, I think that's a waste of money, XYZ, there's a significant portion of the current population or the population we need to that loves that stuff.
Exactly.
Like, oh my goodness, I can ride my bike to work. I've been hearing it in Bay City more and more often, especially from the younger kind of 18 to 29. They're driving less and less, and they're like, I wish I could live in a place that I didn't need a car.
And Phil, we did a transportation study. We've done one in 21, and we did one just this past spring, concentrated on undergraduate student body. And what you say is completely lining up with the statistics. Now, the 2021 study was about 600 population size. This past one was 800 population size. So it's a statistically significant population. Yeah, right. We know that, it was 2021. We had about 15% of our students that were not getting a driver's license, not driving. And this year it was 20. So it's going in the direction that less people are getting driver's licenses and they're choosing to drive. Now, I don't know the research behind it. I read an article in NYT that said cars are just too expensive for young people, right? For you and me, we used to be able to go buy a Cavalier off the lot with the stick shift and no options for like $2, right? Today it's a house payment, right? And so if you're somebody in Gen Z and you're going, is that really where I should be putting my money? I can understand, like, okay, we need to have transit, we need to have mobility options, whether it's bike share, you can go down the whole list, right?
Related to that, walkable downtowns where I can walk and get my basic needs for the day. I can go get food, whatever.
Exactly. Well, in like at Saginaw Valley, so one of the things that we're working on is trying to increase mobility options in the community. We've been working on a federal grant for about 3 years now. Thank you to Congressman Dan Kildee for giving us $500,000. We're going to be building what we're calling the Midtown Transit Gateway, which will be a bus station out at Saginaw Valley, which will connect Saginaw Stars, Bay Metro. Into the future, we would welcome Midland Dial-A-Ride to try to connect the 3 transit authorities out to our campus. Awesome. It's the first step of regional transit, but we're also going to work to try to get Indian Trails to do a stop on our campus as well. And the main reason I mentioned Indian Trails is because it basically goes from Detroit up to the Sioux every single day. Right. But on Sundays, they have a stop in Saginaw, have a stop in Bay City at the transit stations, but neither transit agency is open on Sundays. And we don't have Lyft Uber in the region. So that student has to walk or have somebody that's got a car to come pick them up. And so we want to have the bus stop out at the university so they'd be able to do that. But that's just one example of how outside of academics, right? At SVSU, we got 30 academic programs and 38 of the hottest 50 careers in the state of Michigan, right? Yeah. We got #1 residence halls in the state of Michigan, top 10 in the United States. We've got a top nursing program. Our graduates, their first-time nurse pass rate is 98%. Nationally, it's 92 in the state of Michigan. It's 93. For our teachers, we're top 6 in the state of Michigan out of 28 colleges of education, first-time pass rate on the teacher's exam. Our Cardinal Racing team for engineers, always top 25 in the nation, #1 for baccalaureate engineering programs. When you look at even athletics, we're talking about Cheyenne Nesbitt, right? Yeah. Like All-American, right? Top of her class, D2 athletics, right? At Saginaw Valley. Moot court, we got a top 10 moot court program at Saginaw Valley. And so we pitch the quality because I think a lot of people will often dismiss a regional public university that's not U of M or MSU, one of the flagships, of saying, well, that's just the affordable option. They don't have the quality programs that we're looking at. And I can't say, well, maybe not. I would usually say we usually don't have the capacity to have highly niche academic fields at an undergraduate level where, the bigger schools just because of sheer capacity have it. When we talk about quality, I'll put any one of our students up in many of our academic programs against students that are going to the University of Michigan or Michigan State, and they're going to graduate right alongside their peers. They're going to enter into the jobs, and they can perform at the same level or higher than their peers from those institutions. And so that's the message that we need to communicate to people of saying, if you live in the region, you don't necessarily need to go away. You could go to Delta College. You can go to Saginaw Valley. We have 2 fantastic higher ed institutions in our backyard to go to. If you do go away, and that's going to be the question of trying to bring them back. If you want to do a graduate program, come back to our region. You got Saginaw Valley State University, Central Michigan University. They offer highly academic, good quality graduate level programs that you can do. And so for our enrollment strategy this year, it was great. Our freshman enrollment was up. Our international enrollment was up. Our transfer enrollment was up from community colleges. And I know Delta College's enrollment's up too, which is great for our region. And we need to continue doing that. From the domestic standpoint, we'd like to get back up to, 75, 8,000, 8,500 students in that area. Our residence halls are completely full on campus right now, which is a good problem to have because we have students coming in our community. If you own an apartment complex, please reach out to us. We would love to send
us a message and we will connect you with John.
Yes. And we got to get you hooked up to a transit route so students don't have to ride their cars.
Yeah.
But that's a portion. But the other piece is our international students. We'd love to get back up to the range of 700 to 800 international students at Saginaw Valley. Pandemic did a number on us as it did everybody else, but we want to get those international students back. But the big key is those students that come here, they're coming from Nigeria, Bangladesh, Kenya, right? China, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, all over the world. And they picked our institution, our region for a reason.
Yep.
And so they come here for prosperity. And so for us, the other thing, if you're an employer and you're looking for somebody in a STEM field and you aren't using CPT, which is curricular practical training, or OPT, occupational practical training, contact us out at the university and we will work with you. You don't have to do anything when it comes to visas. SVSU, we take care of the visas. Curricular practical training means basically once they reach sophomore status during their sophomore, junior, and senior years, they can come work for you. There's an hour limit of how much they can do per week, but we take care of the visas. Once they graduate, if they're in a STEM field, they get 3 more years of occupational practical training, which we take care of the visas. They get to stay in the U.S. They get to work for you. And as you're going through, if you find out that person is excellent, well, then get them into the H-1B lottery and try to retain them. And H-1B, if you can get it once, that's 3 years. You can go up again. Usually you get it for another 3 years. So now if you got CPT 3 years, OPT 3 years, H-1B 6 years, you got them for 12 years. And at that point, if you haven't figured out, hey, you know what, now we got to get an immigration attorney involved and try to get them a green card, that's on you.
Yeah.
But I can tell you right now, we don't have enough domestic students entering the STEM pipeline to fulfill all the STEM jobs we need here in not only our region, but in the state of Michigan. So we really have to look at options like that. But for us as a university, if we can tell our international students that want to come from Nigeria or anywhere around the world, hey, we have good job placement rates in our region, and here are the success stories of students. Last year, you interviewed some of them on this podcast that are staying here. And if we can continue to tell that story, they're going to say, well, I'm going to go to Saginaw Valley State University. And then afterwards, they're going to tell their friends and their family members back home, Bay City, Michigan is this really cool, vibrant place that I'm now living. And if they decide to stay here and they get married and they have children, they're going to stay there their entire life. And we know through data that offspring, the kids, are likely to stay there a second generation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I love that you pointed that out because when we talk about attraction, retention, like say that somebody comes to Bay County or the region, a new job from elsewhere. On the surface, you look at that number as one, and you can say, well, we're losing close to a quarter of our workforce population in Bay County by 2045, and regionally the numbers are similar. And one person, like we got to have like 7,000 people. But what you're saying it really underscores the importance of that one person. You got to get that one person here, because that one person ends up with a family of 3 or 5 or whoever it is, or I've interviewed a couple of folks that we get that one person, and then they call them up and say, hey, you should come here. Dr. Nick Muwad from McLaren Bay Region is a great example of that.
Great podcast, by the way.
Thank you. He's amazing, but he was working at a hospital elsewhere, and a colleague of his was a doctor at McLaren, and it was like, bro, you got to come up here. It's great. And so sure enough, Nick's like, okay, I'm going to move up there. And we've got one of the country's best surgeons because of that. And
after that podcast, I was like, Dr. Nick, if you're listening, I'm going to call you if I ever have heart issues.
You have to, because he's the absolute best.
Yes.
And he'll charm you and make you laugh at all his jokes, and then, fix your heart and then send you on your way. But I love what you're saying, because it really underscores that when we talk about attraction, retention, it's incremental movement over a long period of time, coming from all the sectors of the community. Something that you said at the beginning I love, because you said, how is each one of us going to help this? It's not just one program that's responsible for it. It's not up to just those colleges or just those employers or just the schools. It's up to every single person to say, you know what, I have a stake in, I have ownership of this community, and that means something. That means I have to do something to make it better in some way. That helps attraction, retention. Bring some kind of resource, speak positively about where you live. Like, all of those things play in this gigantic puzzle of how do we reverse this trend of population decline?
Yeah, in at the university, so we graduate 1,000 undergrads per year, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a region, I would challenge, how do we keep 500 of them, right? How do we keep 500? And if you plot that out over 15 years, that's 7,500 people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that takes care of almost a quarter of that 40,000 objective. That's one institution.
Right. I was just going to say, now imagine all the institutions making that goal. Every employer saying, well, we're the back end of that funnel, so we have to play a part in that, because those 75 aren't going to stay here if we're not doing our due diligence. Yeah.
I look at Delta College and I go, now Delta, they're in a different spot, because it's a lot of industry people that are here, but it doesn't mean when they graduate, maybe it's not 50%, 100%. How do we get to 100% staying in the region and not going elsewhere? And that, I completely agree on that funnel. It's how do we match the students while they're in college? We got the job fair today, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we match the students? It's kind of like dating, right? That graduate can go anywhere. They can go anywhere globally in the world. Why should they stay here in the region? And so there's the employment piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's the sense of community, right? At the university, we continue to battle with, how do we create the sense of belonging, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we create the sense of belonging for 77% of our students, the ones that we're able to retain. But we know we still lose close to a quarter, right? Because it's either academic reasons or they don't have that sense of belonging. And the sense of belonging comes twofold. It's on campus, but it's also off campus in the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the challenge I asked for the region, is like, how do we, when we have college students on our campus, create that sense of belonging? And we're having the great discussion with Sam from the Bay City DDA.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get those students from campus to come downtown? Having discussions with Bay Metro. How do we increase mobility options for those students to know, hey, I'm going to get on my mobile app, my Google Maps, and figure out Saginaw Valley to downtown Bay City, right? I'm going to go to Old City Hall, or I'm going to My Table, or I'm going to Drift, or I'm any one of the places that are downtown, Retro Rocks, and then to get back on the bus and go back to my campus. And that interaction, however they interface with that downtown community, they're only going to give it a couple times. And if they're not positive receptions, that negative perception is that's embedded, and they're going to go elsewhere when they graduate. So when you talk about those individuals, it's all about those little touch points. I live in Frankenmuth, right? And people ask, how do you get 3 million people to Frankenmuth every year? And it's not chicken and Christmas, right? Like, don't think just because, Iva's and Standish would be having 3 million visitors if it was chicken, right?
Yes.
It's not that. It's the experience.
Yeah.
I sit on city council. I can't tell you how many times I'll go out for a run through town, right? If I'm going over the covered bridge and I see people standing there, I stop and I go, hey, you want a picture of the covered bridge? And they're like, yeah, sure. That positive touch point, right, impacted those 4 people. And they're going to have a conversation with somebody later on that day. Yeah, there's a guy out running. Yes. They were probably like a creepy dude that came up and took our picture because it just came out of the blue.
Yes.
Right. But we created a sense of hospitality, right? And that's like in Bay City. I tell people, it's like in Bay City, it does a good job in certain places on hospitality, right? The festivals, the fireworks, right? I tell people, it's like you go down. It's like there are towns that are literally very prideful of fireworks, right? And you go into the restaurants. There's good hospitality in the restaurants, but it takes time to develop that culture. That if you live in town and you see somebody, they don't look like they're from here, or they're taking a picture, go up and, hey, where are you from? Can I take a picture for you? What can I do? Yeah. But the same thing we got to do for any visitor, college student, college graduate, person with their family, retiree that wants to come into town.
I want to tell you a similar story, because I may not get a chance to tell you this. It's similar experience. So I was working in Indianapolis. I had never worked in Indianapolis before, never even been to Indianapolis before. So I drove down the day before, or the night before, so I could walk around, explore. And so I drive into Indianapolis, drive into the city, drive into downtown, and it's parking garages, and I pull into this parking garage and park the car, and there's signs all over the windows and the walls that say, take your parking ticket with you, the doors will lock. And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird, but it's probably like security, whatever. So I can take my parking ticket with me and go down, and within 5 minutes, I lost that parking ticket. Like, I reach into my pocket, and I'm like, oh my God. Like,
You're done. You're done. That's
You're
locked out.
I could not have lost this thing any faster. So I'm like, retracing my steps back to the parking garage, and it was a windy day. I know I'm not going to find it on the ground anywhere. Yeah. And as I get up to the parking garage, there's this big blue sign with, 1 hour, $5, 2 hours, $15, whatever. And then at the very bottom, it says lost ticket, $80. Oh. And I'm like, not only can I not get up the stairwell to get to my car, so I have to walk up the 7 back and forths up to the top floor where my car is parked, but now I'm going to have to pay almost $100 for this ticket. Yep. And so I was like, well, if I got to pay $100, I might as well walk around the city. So I'm walking around the city, and Indianapolis is beautiful. They've got this like town square with this giant skull.
It's beautiful.
It's like straight out of like Pittsburgh or New York. Yep. The architecture is amazing. Yep. The businesses are there.
The Capitol there.
The Capitol building is fantastic.
Got the Children's Museum, right?
It's amazing. Yeah. And you know what? The entire time of 2 hours, I'm like, hate it, because I'm thinking about like what a bummer this is. So finally go up to the Jeep, get in the Jeep, go down to the parking guy. It's on a little intercom, and so I press the button and I say, hey, I lost my ticket. Do I just swipe my card or what? And there's silence on the other end, and he goes, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Michigan. And he said, well, what are you doing here? I was like, well, I'm working here tomorrow, but I had never been here before, so I drove down, the day before just to explore. There's more silence, and he goes, don't do it again. Have a nice day. And the gate raises, and I yell at this intercom, I love you, Indianapolis. Yes. And I tell that story when I'm talking to communities because it illustrates how important perception is to the experience, to the chance somebody's going to come back, to the relationship people have with the place.
Yes.
All it took was that one interaction, that one moment of hospitality, that one kind word, that little detail that made somebody go, oh, they love it here, or this is a great community. And sometimes when we talk about big community issues, they're intimidating. They seem impossible. There's no way we can overcome it. We have so many things that we have to do. But here's the power of a kind word, of a great story, of something like that that can overcome those things indirectly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's Disney puts on Be Our Guest training. And if you're in hospitality or you want to learn more about the space, just go out and buy the book, Be Our Guest, and read it. And if we all, it'd be great if all of us could read this book, because I think over time, those little interactions you talk about, Phil, and this is even for public safety, this is for everybody. If you are interfacing your front line for the public, you are the ambassador for your community, right? At our university, we're not perfect, right? But we've continued to work at this of saying, when you have that interaction, it doesn't matter if it's with a guest, a current student, a prospective student, an alumnus, any stakeholder, if it's not positive, they're going to walk away with a negative perception.
Yep.
And whoever they are, they're going to have that negative perception of the institution, which means we now have to do 9 pieces of good marketing to that person to buy them back into a positive relationship with said university. And that's the same thing in our community. You know, how do you design your parking? How do you design your streets, right? Do you have curb cuts on your streets? If you're trying to appeal to that retiree aging in place population as part of your population growth strategy, do you have those curb cuts? Do you have a council on aging? Do you have services for those people? Do you have the cultural amenities that they want? The answer in our region is yes. I think we've got a fantastic region. I think Bay City is fantastic. What we struggle at is telling our story. You know, I think with the dissolving of media, you know, this is kind of new media. But you know, the old newspaper media. I remember growing up, it's like, what are we doing this weekend? Flip open the Bay City Times. Flip open the Saginaw News. And while MLive still exists and Midland Daily News is still there, I think they would admit that it's a much lesser capacity, and that is not there. And so it's for like the hay-based cities of the world, the podcasting, the route-based cities, these different organizations of telling those stories about what's going on, but to that external audience. So, you know, whether or not it's a retiree or it's somebody that's getting married, looking at, you know, where they want to live. Hey, talking about Bay City Public Schools has a fantastic school district. Essexville, Garber, you're going to be building a STEM center. Bangor, John Glenn, you've got Matt Schmidt, who's like just the gladiator of superintendents out there. I think he's probably the longest serving in the state of Michigan. Go, Matt.
Yeah, dude.
You know, and if you go regionally, you got Frankenmuth, you got Saginaw Township, you got Saginaw Public, you've got Midland, you've got Freeland, you've got Hemlock, who's got the STEM center, right? And I'm sorry, I'm missing a few of you. Don't hate me, but you're all doing great in your own spaces, and you're in our region. We have this like cornucopia of options. Like, what option do you want? Do you want that rural public school like Pinconning? Okay, go live up in the Pinconning school district if you want that desired living. If you are looking for the STEM center, maybe it's Essexville, Garber. If you're just looking for good comprehensive districts that have dual enrollment, early college options, maybe that's Bangor and Bay City, right? But it's advertising to those families like, yes, we might not be Manhattan. Yes, we might not have a international Montessori where your kids are graduating from high school at 4 years old and going on to Harvard at 5, right?
Yeah, right.
That doesn't exist here. But on average, we're above average nationwide, right? And if you're looking for that option, we have it here in the region. Those cultural amenities, I tell people, I was like, who has a ship in the river, right? That you built in that town. We talk about that civically engaged culture in Bay City. Yeah. Like a bunch of people got together, had this vision, executed it. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times when I was growing up as a kid, they were talking about, we're going to get the Edson. I was like, yeah, good luck. And when it happened, I sat there, I ate crow, and I was like, that's really cool. Yeah. They did that. That dedicated veterans population in Bay City is amazing. Amazing. You look at Dow Gardens and you go, oh my gosh, this asset in Midland. You go out there, and I can't tell you how many people that live in the region who've never walked around Dow Gardens. I'm like, go out on a Saturday, take your kids, or go to Whiting Forest and go on their raised walkway, which is amazing, right? Go into Saginaw, go to the art museum, go check out the zoo, go check out, you know, when you're in Bay City, just go for a walk along the river. Yeah. Like these assets we take for granted. Somebody from Ohio, I'll give the knock at Ohio. They got Lake Erie, right? Like in the 70s, their river caught on fire, right? Not the best place when we talk about environmental stewardship. Sorry, Ohio. Yeah. But in our region, you sit there and you go, this is amazing. The bass tournaments, walleye fishing. I mean, Eddie Clements, I tell people, I was like, He is one of the most passionate people I've ever met when it comes to fishing.
He loves his fish.
He loves his fish, right? And the fact that one individual was able to pull together a group of people and bring those tournaments back is amazing, right? And I know down the road, Tall Ships is going to return in Bay City. As with anything, it's cyclical, right?
Yeah.
The main asset we got is the water. You have a caring community. The names and the faces at the table might change, but it's going to come back. Fireworks for a number of years. I remember going back 20 years ago, people were saying, oh, it's the fireworks, going to make it. It's made it, right? I remember growing up and it was the pig gig. It's something different now, right?
Yeah, Labadee Rib Fest.
Rib Fest, right? And the names and the faces change, but those certain things stay. I mean, I would love for us to get the River of Time back, right? Mm-hmm. That was the one thing I remember as a kid that just was cool. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing the canoe out in the river, right? Mm-hmm. But these are the things as a kid I remember, and I go, why do I live in the region? That. Yes. So anybody that's listening, tell those stories. You're all awesome people.
Yeah.
Be the one individual that's helping us grow our population strategy by telling the story.
Yeah, so many great things that you're saying here. You referenced like a Saginaw Valley, saying, are we perfect? No, but we're getting better.
Yeah,
and I love that approach when we talk about communities because it really holds both of the truths of a community in that we have amazing people, amazing resources, amazing assets, amazing experiences to offer people. At the same time, we also need to continually get better and we need to improve and we need all hands on deck in both of those areas if we want to continue to grow. People that are saying, we have this amazing thing, let's make it even more amazing. Let's communicate that resource out into the world so more people know that we have it. At the same time, we need people saying, well, we need to fix these things. We need to make these things better to support that. And so you have to have that value of a community. And on the other side of it, you need to be willing to communicate that value. Because if you have these great things, these great assets, things that people can make, things that can make the lives of people better, they got to know about it. And so there has to be a communication of that as well.
And you said it. We're in a good place. We can always do better, right? And I look at housing. Like you got a rock star like Jenna Costa, who could have gone anywhere in the world. Where'd she come back to? Her and Anthony came to Michigan. Right? Yep. They came back, raising their kids here. Quality of life factor, and then she's helping address the housing issue. I can't tell you any community right now in the region that's not trying to crack the housing issue, right? And there's no magic solution to this problem, right? But it's going to take some rolling up the sleeves, having difficult conversations, courageous conversations about what do we do with our land use patterns, right? In Frankenmuth, we actually have a land growth boundary. Unless you're in the city of Frankenmuth, Saginaw, or Frankenmuth Township, unless you're on specific parcels that have been given the green light on building a house, you have to build in the city of Frankenmuth, right?
Interesting.
This is like conservative Frankenmuth, right? Fiscally conservative Frankenmuth. Why? Because that farmland outside this city is extremely valuable to those farmers, right? There's not land speculators coming in and buying up the land because they're not selling the land. And when we talk about climate change, I mean, people have said, I was like, this is not something that's down the road. This is happening right now. That people, you look at droughts that are going on around across the country. We have one of the world's largest assets of water. People are going to come here. We talk about agriculture. We're kind of, I don't want to say ag proof, but our agricultural land is going to become more valuable as we go down the road because there's going to be certain parts of the country that it's a futile operation to try to continue with ag. And so for us, we have to save that ag land. So when we think about Bay City, is Bangor and Monitor and the city of Bay City and Essexville and Hampton, right? Are they prepared to have a conversation of saying, could we put in a land growth boundary of saying, let's infill into our communities? And so if we've got, through the Bay County Land Bank, you've got empty lots in the city of Bay City that could be built upon. They've already got curb, gutter, sidewalks, water, sewer, electrical, gas, ready to go. You don't need to put in that new infrastructure. How do we incentivize that type of behavior and saying, okay, to Bangor and Monitor that might miss out on the new green space growth, you get 50% of the property taxes off that new build and you don't do anything, right? And if that's me and I'm on the township board, I'm saying, wait. We don't need to put in new road, curb, gutter, sidewalk, water, sewer. We don't have to spend anything. We're just going to get money. Sign me up.
Right.
Right. Because we're part of the solution now. Right. And then you can look at other spaces of saying, Monitor's done a fantastic job with their land growth right off of Mackinac and US 10. I mean, that's going to continue to grow. That DDA out there is a fantastic operation. Bangor has the exact same opportunities as well as Hampton. When we think about business and industry, semis don't want to have to drive through towns to where they want to go. They want to be off the highway. They want to have easy access, right?
Yep.
And so that's not going to change, but you can change in the way that the land use works. And if you can spend less on infrastructure, get more in on tax revenues, you can now spend those monies on transit. You can spend those monies on cultural amenities that create that quality of life factor, which helps grow the community. But Midland's done a good job at it. I'll say, that their agreements with Williams Township and Larkin Township with the City of Midland. City of Midland's kind of done a good job with infilling. And I would say they're kind of a poster child, but the townships in statute and constitutionally in the state of Michigan, they've kind of been a free-for-all for a while. And now that they've grown out, and you're seeing a lot of grayfield or brownfield properties coming on the tax rolls, and they're like, we just have lots of property with water, sewer, curb, gutter, sidewalks that we're spending money on, but we're not collecting the taxes off that property that we could. What are we going to do? Fashion Square Mall, right down the street from us, right? I think Fashion Square, Jordan Dice, he's bought the Midland Mall. Thank you, Jordan, for bringing life back to that place. Like, he's got a vision. He's got passion behind it. He's a local business owner. He's got ownership of it. Fashion Square Mall could probably do the same thing. It'd be looking at, like, does Sears become an esports arena, right? That all of a sudden you're bringing a magnet in there, right? Does JCPenney become new urban housing for college graduates? Just like it's a big dormitory where the food, right? If you get people there, then all of a sudden those ancillary stores, they're like, oh, I don't need to go out in January. I can do my shopping right here. And online retailers, that's going to continue to go in that direction. But it's the boutique face-to-face stuff that you see down here in downtown Saginaw or Old Town. That's going to continue to grow.
The theme that I'm kind of hearing in what you're saying, from everything from housing to what do we do with the Fashion Square Mall, is this idea of we have to think creatively. We have to be willing to adapt. We have to be willing to take the first step, like you were referencing the bus stop at SVSU. It's not the solution to regional transportation. It's not going to absolve kind of the traffic jam that is public transportation in the region, but it is the first step to it. And then you take the second step and the third step and the fourth step and the fifth step. And I think that's so important for us as a local community of Bay County and a regional community as the Great Lakes Bay region, is we have to be willing to be creative, adapt, be aggressive too, like because these are long-term challenges with long-term solutions. It doesn't mean that we can kind of just dip our toe in and try it just a little bit, and we'll pick this back up. No, you got to hit it hard. You got to hit it hard. If you want to think about it in the frame of a competition, you look at other regions within the state of Michigan that are growing leaps and bounds. And so if we want to be competitive comparatively, we as a community, a broad community, have to say, we are willing to intentionally, creatively, and aggressively address these challenges, understanding that we have to take the first step. We make that first step better than the second step, the third step. We get everybody claiming ownership of this issue, everybody working in their expertise. We're uplifting folks that can address problems like Jen in Housing Forward in Midland. You're one of the few people living within 100 square mile radius that could help us with this. So we're going to put you in a position to do it. Those are kind of the themes that I hear as you're talking.
And fail forward.
Yes.
Fail forward.
Yep.
It's like nobody's going to criticize you for failing. They're going to criticize you for not doing anything. Right? I will always, every day of the week, if somebody goes out there and they try something and they test and fail, great. You're an entrepreneur. Nobody bats. I mean, batting 300 in the major leagues is a success, right? So if you're batting 30%, I'm going to claim that to be a success. We talked about housing, transportation. Absolutely. We got to continue to crack that. And we're working on it. It's going to be small incremental steps. I would tell people, it's like, sustainable change takes time.
Yes.
Transformational change takes time. Changing a culture, we are a vehicle culture here in Michigan, takes time. So don't put pressure on yourselves. It stresses yourself out that you're not meeting metrics or deadlines. It's a train of thought, right? Childcare, I don't want to get into childcare. Childcare is a whole different 5-hour conversation with somebody that knows what they're talking about in that topic area. But when we talk about coming back to Bay City, coming back to Saginaw Valley, we think about how do we attract people, right? A couple of years ago, it was actually about 5 years ago, Susan Elder, who's a German teacher at Bay City Central, said, hey, I'd like to do a exchange partnership with Ansbach in Bavaria. And she says, I know you've, through your sister city relationships with Gunzenhausen and Frankenmuth, you could help that set up. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do this, right? 5 years later, they've now had students from Ansbach here twice, in 2022, 2024. In 2022, we worked with Shaheen Development to put in a public space in Uptown that is the two cities connected art, right?
Yeah, it's
Public
super cool.
art. Yeah. And that was a collaboration of Bay County Leadership 2022, taking on the project, right? Working with Kathy Dardis over the Saginaw ISD, working with Susan Elder at the Bay City School District, working with Saginaw Valley. Harvey Schneider of Delta College was involved, right?
Yeah.
And we did this. And it's now created this catalyst of this small cultural operation. And there's tons of them going on in Bay City.
Yep.
And it's about people coming together and saying, how can what they do help with our population strategy?
Yes.
Maybe there's a student that comes over from Ansbach and says, you know what? I want to study at Saginaw Valley. And they come here, they do OPT, CPT, and all of a sudden 30 years later, they're working for Corning Glass or Dow, or maybe they opened up their own small operation in downtown Bay City. They're working for Michigan Sugar, SK Siltron, whoever.
Yeah. A German pastry business, perhaps, or a meat shop.
I would love I would love a Metzgerei or a brewery. That would be fantastic.
Yes. Oh,
right?
yeah.
Mr. Fernier, I miss your Steinhaus.
Yes. Yeah. Before we go, can you kind of sum up, give me the general, like, most important points of this? Like, I'd love for people to kind of walk away with the last idea in their head. Like, what to you are the most critical keys to this puzzle of attraction retention?
It's hospitality, right? It's truly hospitality. It's every individual has ownership of this, right? Understanding that as you're developing a strategy, I think we as a region, not only in Bay City, but as a region, need to sit down and say, what does the Vision 2040 look like, right? How do we sit down and say, how do we help out with college enrollments, knowing that that's going to help our graduation? How do we help out with talent attraction, retention of college graduates to go work at Corning when they have 1,200 new employees, I think, building solar panels, right, next to a Hemlock Semiconductor, who is a growing corporation in the polysilicon space. How do they work at Dow or SK Siltron or SC Johnson or Michigan Sugar or any one of our big companies? Same thing for teaching, right? How do we continue to attract teachers to want to stay here and work here in the region? And we all own it. And then thinking about, how do we get families from elsewhere? If they come to work at Dow or they come from elsewhere, they're boomerangs. They come back and they want to be here because of their family. How do we create the hospitality and the hospitable community that makes them feel welcome when they get here? And then the final one is retirees. Retirees is huge. They can go anywhere, and if they choose to come here, they come here for a very good reason. In Frankenmuth, we built a development called the Springs, and when I was out there door knocking, running for county commission, every other house was somebody that was not from Frankenmuth. They were from all over the state. I had some people from out of state, and I said, "Why did you choose here?" I love Frankenmuth, right? And so there's something to be said there. Trying to understand, what does that recipe look like? And in Bay City's got all the ingredients, right? And it's happening. It's believing that you can do it, right? And making it happen. And there's one piece I did completely miss, and I apologize. Veterans. Yes. Veterans is a huge population, right? They graduate from the service, or they graduate. They serve their time in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, right? Space Force. They
Pew, pew.
yeah, exactly. It takes me back to like a Bond movie from the 70s. And they have these GI benefits. Where do they go with those GI benefits? They could go anywhere in the country, any institution of higher learning. How do we create Delta College and Saginaw Valley State University to be the destinations for veterans around the country to want to come and get their associate's degree or bachelor's degree? If we get them here, they stay here.
Yeah.
And if we can get them to stay here, population growth.
Yeah, superstars. Hospitality. Have you read the book Unreasonable Hospitality?
No,
by Will Geer? I'm gonna pull it from the shelf and I'll give it to you, or I'll order you a copy.
Well, thank you.
Because Will was the executive or the owner of First Madison Park in the restaurant in New York City.
Yeah.
I'm probably screwing up the name, but one of the best restaurants in the world. And he came in to kind of reinvigorate this restaurant that had kind of lost a lot of its shine. And he took this philosophy of unreasonable hospitality and I'll give you an example of what he means by that. There was this family that came into the restaurant. So this is like ultra fine dining restaurant. Family came into the restaurant. They were from South America, but this was their first time in New York City. It was in the winter. They had saved up their money, and the last day of their trip, they wanted to take their kids to a restaurant experience that they'd never get again in their life. Yeah. And so they went to this restaurant, and the waiters, of course, are hearing this, and they go to Will and kind of fill him in. So they stop the dinner ends, and the waiter had noticed that the kids were looking out these gigantic glass windows because it was snowing in New York City, and they had never seen snow before. So what they did was, after they finished their meal, the waiter says, folks, I really hope that you enjoyed your meal, but your night isn't over yet. Yeah. And they had ordered a limousine for this family. And while the family was eating, they sent waiters to run to any store within running distance that had sleds, and bought the kids sleds. And inside this limousine were sleds for the entire family. And they took them to Central Park so that they could have their first and maybe only sledding experience in the winter at Central Park. And like the whole book has this idea that hospitality is making people feel valued and taken care of. We communicate, like, sometimes hospitality gets a bad rap because it's just people being nice. It's that like one little mint on the pillow that like nobody really cares about, or saying hi. That's part of it. But hospitality at its core is making people feel valued and taken care of. And you do that in a bunch of different ways, by having the assets that make them feel that way, by working on the things that need to be worked on, so that they start to become assets, and then also communicating that in a way that says, you are special, you are valued, you are important enough to us that we want you to stay here, or we want you to come here.
Genuine, impactful interactions.
Yes.
Right? And it could be the simplest thing, right? Hey, can you help me out? Yes. How can I help you out? I'm looking for is usually it, right? When you're walking down, if you want to be passive in how you do this, when you're walking down the street in your community, you see garbage on the ground, pick it up. That nonverbal is genuine. It's an impactful interaction. And you do that, and people say, wow, that person has ownership of their community. Those are the community standards around here, right? To the point that in Frankenmuth one time I saw somebody chuck a McDonald's bag out their window, and I followed them to where they stopped, and I said, go back and pick up your McDonald's bag. Kind of creepy on my standpoint.
Yeah.
But they were like a pair of like 16-year-old boys.
Yeah.
And they were like freaked out that I was going to go tell mom. And they drove back and they picked up their bag with their head down. Yep. And they got, but that's the kind of hospitality that it goes both ways, that you got to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah. And it's that's internally as well too. It's not just like people that you don't know, or that new customer, or whoever it is. It's how we we as a community treat each other with that same kind of value, how we communicate with each other, the words that we use, how we try to seek understanding, how we embrace this idea that if we want to be successful, we have to be successful together. And that means looking at each other as working on the same team. Obviously with different opinions and different values and expertise and thoughts and ideas and all those things, but where you bridge those together is how you communicate and how you treat each other. And so we can't expect to be hospitable to those outside our community if we're not also there. And so I think that's also such a critical piece. Yep. It's kind of the thing that underlines the success of all of this is we as a community have to be hospitable to each other as well.
Exactly.
Man, John, I want to thank you so much. I in the last conversation with Jason Story, we were gushing over SVSU and Delta specifically because we have the most interaction with you too. In just how much we love your excitement to get in the muck and figure this out, because a lot of other educational institutions could have said, well, we've been doing this since 1779. Community, you go worry about that problem over there. Yeah. But here you are, SVSU and Delta, just like jumping into the pit and forming partnerships and saying, what new program can we offer? What's the incentive that we can do to get more kids here? And that's exactly the approach that's going to make us successful. And so you're such an incredible community partner.
Thank you. And all that credit goes to both Dr. Gavin and Dr. Grant.
They are amazing. You guys are amazing. They
are two amazing educational leaders. Yeah. And I've not met people in higher ed that usually don't have an ego. And if either of them have an ego, they never shown it. And they have been very dynamic and transformational. And I love it.
We were just at a meeting together, and Dr. Grant was giving the opening remarks, and I sent you the text like, I love this guy so much.
And you're not the only one. It happens all the time.
I know you get it all the time. It's like, oh, stop talking to me about George. But I think you're pretty cool too, John Kaczynski. Thanks so much for the time today, but of course, all the time and the work that you spend just pouring into our community and helping us address this challenge of attraction and retention. So, John, thank you so much, my man.
Thank you, Phil.
Sweet. You're awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.